Hello there everybody and welcome back to Movie Squirm. Today I'm going to be doing a ranking of all the horror movies I've seen in 2024 so far. We're about halfway through the year now and I've got to be honest, I don't think it's been the best year for horror by any means. In fact, it's been a very disappointing one. There are one or two that I've really liked, which I'll get to towards the end of the video, but mostly, it's just been a bit of a generic year for horror, and in some cases, a very bad year for horror. But I do have hopes that it's about to pick up after just seeing all the new horror movies that are about to come out for the second half of 2024. I do believe it's going to pick up, and this video will look very, very different at the end of the year, I imagine. We've got Maxine coming, Terrifier 3, Alien Romulus, all that good stuff. But here, I'm just going to talk about the movies that have come out so far. Now, this video was recorded before A Quiet Place Day 1 come out, so that movie will not feature in this video. Also, I am yet to get to Shyamalan's Daughters movie, The Watched, and there's a couple of more smaller indie titles that I just haven't got to yet. But we've got 18 movies to talk about here, and you will have heard of most of these films. So let's just get into it now in the absolute last place in 18th, and that is... Yes, that's right. In 18th place is The Exorcism. Now, I've got to be honest, guys, I did not hold much hope for this movie going in. I just thought it's going to be another Exorcist film. It was announced just a few months ago before it's released, and it's just going to be one of them kids screaming on the bed, shouting obscenities at a priest, and it wasn't quite that. So I do appreciate the approach it went for. This is all surrounding this actor who's had a bit of a bad life. He's an ex-alcoholic and stuff. He's got a little bit of drama going on in the past that we sort of uncover as the movie goes on. And his daughter has just been expelled from school. She comes to live with him, and he's trying to mend that broken relationship, all whilst trying to get his acting career back on track. And he is actually playing a priest in this movie, within the movie. And the movie they are filming here is a remake of The Exorcist. They don't actually fully say that, but it is. That is the movie he is meant to be starring in this film. And there's a bit of weird shit going on set, just like The Exorcist kind of had when that was getting made. There's a lot of stories going around about how that movie was sort of cursed and stuff. So I liked the different approach, and about 10 minutes in, I thought, okay, this is going to take me by surprise. But unfortunately, guys, it just didn't. And this is one of the most dull, depressing, and boring-ass movies I have ever seen in my life. It was an absolute chore to get through. I was trying my best to stay awake in the cinema. It just absolutely bored me to death, and I have never wanted to walk out of a movie so much in my life until I got to this one. Now, the third act does go into a little bit more of the horror roots and stuff, but by then it's just way too late. I've heard a lot of people say they like the first half of this movie. For me, I just didn't. I didn't. There's no redeeming qualities about this film, apart from maybe the acting. I mean, it's pretty solid across the board. Russell Crowe does a job here, like he did in The Pope's Exorcist, but I've got to say, he is miscast. He doesn't belong in the horror genre. He just doesn't. It doesn't suit him. It doesn't fit, even though he's done an okay job. And man, the director of this movie, the movie within the movie, is one of the most unlikable characters I have ever seen in my life. So it tried to do something with the meta side of things involving the horror genre and The Exorcist and stuff, but ultimately it just failed, and I do not recommend this movie to anyone. It's by far the worst movie I have seen in years. It is really, I will be amazed if anything tops this to be the worst movie of the year so far. So in 18th place is The Exorcism. Next up, we have a shark movie called No Way Up. I was quite looking forward to this one. It kind of looked cool from the trailer, where this plane crash happens and it lands in the ocean, and it's basically just an air pocket within the plane, and these characters are stuck at the bottom of the ocean in this plane, in this air pocket, while sharks start to circle the plane as they smell blood. And it had Cole Meany in there, who I kind of like from the movie Con Air, so I thought, you know what, this could be a surprise. But my God, man, this movie was just not good at all. I mean, I get excited for shark movies sometimes, and I probably shouldn't, because lots of them are just disappointing. Cole Meany was just brought nothing to this film whatsoever. I mean, he's not even in it that long, but his character is terrible. He's like this FBI agent, but you just can't take him seriously. He's trying to protect this girl who's on the plane and stuff because her father is like this high-end ranked guy in the government or something, and he just comes off so cringy. The characters are all badly acted. I mean, the movie is just full of terrible actors, and the shark attacks and stuff are so poorly edited that they're hardly even a shark attack. I mean, you can't even see what's going on. There's no tension there. I mean, there's no characters are just standing around for the entirety of this film going, how are we going to get out of here? None of them are coming up with a plan, basically. There isn't even any extra, bits of trouble thrown at them. Like you see in these movies, the obstacles keep coming and coming. It's just them standing around talking for most of the middle section of the film, basically. And I just couldn't get into it at all, guys. It was a very, very poor movie. I'm having a go at low budget movies, but you can feel it as you're watching the film. And it's just a very poor shark movie, unfortunately. The sharks look terrible. The characters are poor. You don't latch onto anyone. And although it's a good concept, it was just executed so poorly. So that is No Way Up. Next up, we have Imaginary, and I honestly thought I wouldn't see a worse movie at the cinema this year until I seen The Exorcism, and I would probably watch this 100 times over The Exorcism. But although that is a true statement, this is not a very good movie either. This is something Blumhouse really do have to answer for now. This is everything bad about Blumhouse is thrown right into this movie. This is basically about a family who moved to a new home. That old trope again. And one of the young daughters in this movie finds this teddy bear called Chauncey, and she starts to play games with this teddy bear, this imaginary friend that she's got within the teddy bear. And then these games start to become a little bit too much, and the stepmother of the family is sort of looking at her going, what's going on here? This isn't right. And things start to build where this teddy bear might actually have something about it, and getting this young girl to do the bad things. That old chestnut, you've heard that story before. Also, there's a little bit of family drama thrown in there just for good measure to try and to latch you on to some of the characters here, but you really don't because they're just so boring and uninteresting. The young daughter who has a sister in this movie, the older sister, she is just a very unlikable character. It wants you to redeem her to redeem herself towards the end, and you just don't care no more. Also, it goes into a very Hellraiser 2 Hellbound situation in the third act where we're going inside walls of the house and stuff. The CGI is terrible. The jump scares are just all over the place. It's just a very teenage-aimed horror movie that is there to make money and nothing else by putting this teddy bear on the cover. It was an absolutely awful film, and when it comes to light about the actual monster, this imaginary friend, it looked terrible on screen, and unfortunately it just really didn't do nothing for me. The only positive I can really give it is the young actress was okay, and also the theme of creativity is weaved well into the movie because the stepmother of the family, she's like this illustrationist artist, and the movie plays on the theme of imagining things and using creativity in your head. I thought it done that quite well, but overall, a very poor movie from Blumhouse, one of their worst, to be honest. I just did not like this movie at all, and this was actually one of my most anticipated films of the year, so shows how much I know. So that is Imaginary. Next up, we have the very first horror movie that was released this year, I believe, and this was on Shudder, and that is Destroy All Neighbors. And this has Alex Winter in, who you'll remember from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and he moves in next door to this aspiring musician, and he is the neighbor from hell. He's like this weird-looking guy. He almost looks like a monster sort of thing, and this neighbor is freaked out by him. And as soon as he moves in, this Alex Winter character, he's playing his music so loud and stuff. So this neighbor decides to knock at his house and straighten things out, and his life starts to go into a downward spiral of hell. I thought this movie started off pretty well, actually. The first 20 minutes, I sort of got into it. I liked the sort of tone it was going for, with the sort of comedic style mixed with the horror, but it just goes way too wacky. It tries to pay way too much homage to horror comedies from the 80s, and it just can't quite recapture that. the main character I couldn't get behind at all. I just started to dislike him more as the movie went on. He just became this really annoying character. The movie is way too goofy for its own good, and it just is all over the place, and an ending that leaves a very bad taste in your mouth as well. I just did not like the ending of this movie whatsoever. The special effects and the makeup design and stuff. I say special effects, I should say practical effects, really. That was all done well. You know, they stuck to their guns there with that. But it's a very forgettable movie, and it just really didn't do nothing for me. Despite me looking forward to it, I thought it looked kind of cool with what it was going for the trailers and stuff, but ultimately it does fail. So that is Destroy All Neighbors. Next up, we have Baghead. Now, follows this young girl and her friend who are given this pub by one of the girl's fathers. She doesn't really know him too well, but he gives her the keys anyways because he's killed, and she goes and basically lives in this pub for a little bit, and she discovers downstairs that there is this creature, and it sort of has this bag on its head that comes out the wall, and when you speak to this creature, you can speak to a loved one for 2 minutes, but no longer, because if you speak to it for longer, bad things will start to happen. So, you know, characters sort of know about this baghead that's living under the stairs, and they come in, pay this young girl to speak to this baghead character, and she sees it as a money-making scheme. So she's like, okay, I'm going to let people in to talk to their dead loved ones. You know, so this guy comes in, he wants to speak to his wife all the time who died, and this baghead will take the form of the loved one, and it really does look like you're speaking to your loved one, basically. And it's a really good concept. I think this movie was made in Ireland, if I'm correct there, but it does feel like a lot of a repeat and rinse and repeat cycle, with characters just talking to this baghead, speaking to a loved one, trying to figure things out, and then so on. And it kind of goes on like that from the second to final act, basically. So I couldn't quite get into this one. The baghead character was a cool design, I thought. Kind of reminded me of that villager in Resident Evil 4 who's running around with a chainsaw with the bag on his head. But it goes for a lot of jump scares. There's a bit of CGI in there, and it just felt, even though it was trying to be different, like a very generic horror movie. So unfortunately, I just couldn't really get into this one. Freya Allan was okay in the role, I suppose, as the main protagonist, but another very forgetful horror movie from this year. So that is Baghead. Next up, we have Taro, and this is a movie that I've heard people say is actually the worst of the year. So I went into this with no expectation whatsoever, but I was mildly surprised. I didn't like this movie very much, to be honest, but I got a bit more entertainment out of it than I thought I was going to, or than a lot of other people did. This is basically about this bunch of characters who rent this cottage out for the week, and they're all like cardboard cutout characters, nothing to them at all. There's no personality whatsoever, and that is a huge problem in horror movies, basically for a long time. I mean, obviously you get great characters, but a lot of movies just don't have very memorable horror characters, especially when there's a group of them, especially in these modern ones as well. Basically, they find a group of tarot cards. One of them reads out all their fortunes, and they all assign like this card, and they have a demonic sort of character on the card. So one of them gets their fortune read, and it will say Hell Priest on the card. And as this character is sort of killed off in the future, you know, and a few days later, this Hell Priest will appear. There's also this guy who gets a Jester character, and when he's sort of being stalked by this demon, he appears as a Jester character, basically. So I thought that concept was pretty good. It's like a Final Destination film where all these murders are made to look like accidents. So each character is killed off who got their fortune read, but it's made to look like it was an accident, basically. And that is like a Final Destination style formula, which was interesting, but it's nowhere near as good as them movies. And it just, again, felt like another very generic horror movie. You know, it follows that very same characters find themselves in the situation, things start to happen, they find someone who knows about the situation, and then they try and beat it, basically. you've seen it all before. It's a very teenage focused movie. You know, this is aimed at more like 13 to 14 year olds because the gore isn't there. I do think this movie would have benefited a lot more if the kills on screen were awesome and creative, but they're all cut away. You know, you can tell they're going for that 12A rating or whatever. And yeah, it just really was a very forgettable film. I don't think I'll ever watch it again, in all honesty. So that is Taro. Next up, we have a surprise for some people, I imagine, and that is The First Omen. Now, don't get me wrong, Nell Tigerphy was great in the role. You know, it was a well-directed movie. I forgot the director's name, I'm really sorry, but I believe this was her directorial debut. So there's some nice shots in this movie, and I think she has a lot of talent going forward, and I'm excited to see what other movies she can do. The name will appear on the screen. I'm sorry I forgot. But this is basically a prequel to the original Omen. And I watched all the Omen movies leading up to this. I was quite getting excited, getting in the mood. And this is all basically centered around this convent. And we have this upcoming sort of nun who basically goes to this convent and weird shit is starting to happen, basically. And it basically follows the story of how Damien became what he is at the very start of the Omen movie. And it is all just leading up to that, basically. Problem with this movie is it's 2 hours long and nothing really happens in it until about the last 20 minutes. It is an absolute slog to get through. It really is one that bored me a little bit. And even though it was nicely directed, there are some very dark shots in this movie. Like, the movie is really dark. And that's another problem I just see with horror movies these days. Like, the movies are so dark, man. I mean, why do we have to do this? The jump scares didn't really work for me at all. It just had that little tiny bit more class about it in the filmmaking department compared to a lot of the other generic horror movies. My biggest problem with this film is that it goes for a very impactful ending. And when you've seen The Omen 3, it does not matter. Like, the ending of this film just done nothing for me because I know how Damien's journey ends. So I just didn't care. So yeah, The First Omen, unfortunately for me, didn't do much, but everyone has been raving about this film and a lot of people seem to love it. So I'm glad you guys like it. But for me, it's just a very forgetful film and one of my least favorite in the Omen franchise, to be honest. That is The First Omen. Next up is Night Swim. Now, I actually had this behind The First Omen, but the more I think about it, I think I like this one a little bit more, and I probably want to rewatch this one over The First Omen. And a lot of people are probably saying, "What, you don't know what you're talking about now." A lot of people are probably turning the video off because a lot of people hate this movie. But you know what? I didn't mind it. I think it definitely suffers in the third act when the reveal is starting to happen about this haunted swimming pool. But everything up to that, I was quite enjoying. I kind of got into it. I liked some of the tension building and stuff when kids were in the swimming pool on their own, and weird shit was happening within the pool. I thought there was a few creepy moments, especially behind where the water filters through, like the drain locks and stuff. I thought there was some good things happening here. I liked the family in the movie, Wyatt Russell's family. I thought they were all good characters. Kind of didn't want anything bad to happen to them. It is just when we start revealing what this pool is all about and stuff, it starts to just go down the generic path, and the jump scares sort of become very silly. The CGI gets thrown in, and it just basically leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But everything leading up to that in the first hour, I thought was done really well. It just couldn't execute it properly, unfortunately. But I didn't mind it. It wasn't too bad. Stephen King is actually a fan of this movie. He went on Twitter and said, "Don't listen to anyone. Don't listen to the critics. This movie is great." I wouldn't go as far as say it's great, Stephen, but it's a good effort, I suppose. I didn't hate it as much as everyone else. So that is Night Swim. Okay, these are all movies that I kind of rated a little bit higher on my letterbox. I'll leave my letterbox down below, guys, if you want to go and check it out. All their movies were 2.5 or lower. This is now on the 3 out of 5 gauge. And the first one we have here is Infested. Now, this is a French movie where a bunch of spiders sort of have an outbreak in this apartment block, and everyone is trapped in there. They can't sort of get out because there's government outside who won't let anyone leave because of this big infestation, and some of these spiders are really poisonous and stuff. Kind of like the movie Wreck, if you can imagine that film, but it's not found footage and it's not zombies, it's spiders. Now, this one did actually play on my arachnophobia a little bit. I do not like spiders at all, and I was kind of itching myself at times, looking around the room, thinking, is there any spiders in here now? And I think it was a very nicely shot film as well. Sebastian Wernicek, I think this director's name is. He's going to be doing one of the new Evil Dead films. I think there's 2 on the horizon. I'm very happy about that because some of the shots that he does in this movie are great. He uses mirrors a lot as well. So like when characters are brushing their teeth, you can see in the top corner of the mirror all these spiders coming through the vents and stuff, and you're like, holy shit, this girl is in this room with hundreds of spiders and she doesn't even know about it. There's also a great spiraling shot where these characters have to go through this corridor that is infested with spiders all over the place, and you're like, holy shit, how the hell are they going to get through here? And the camera movements and stuff really shows what they've got to go and get through here. I also think the spiders look kind of cool. Some of them are CGI, but it's mainly the ones where there's a lot on screen. You can't really tell. And then we have some of these giant spiders that look like they're used by practical effects and stuff. My biggest problem with the movie is the characters. I do not like any of these characters in this movie. They're kind of little petty criminals. You can't really get behind them, and you really don't care what happens to them. I was more bothered about the older people in the apartment who you don't really see for the movie at all, but I just kind of wanted them to get out because I felt a bit, I felt a bit mean on them, but I didn't care what happened to the rest of the characters, the main characters, put it that way. But it's a pretty good movie, and I haven't seen too many spider infestation films, and this was a pretty good one. So that is Infested. Next up, we have Under Paris, another shark movie, but this one was a lot better than No Way Out. This is a straight-to-Netflix film that just dropped out of nowhere, and this basically follows a shark outbreak in the river of Paris. I forgot the damn name of that river, I'm really sorry, but it runs through the heart of Paris. And these sharks are kind of mutated, and it kind of reminded me of Jaws vs. Deep Blue Sea, because there is a bit of a political thing going on here with the mayor and stuff. She won't listen to anyone. It is taken out of the scrapbook of the Jaws storyline, it has to be said. But the sharks here are kind of like Deep Blue Sea kind of sharks, where they're just like, not your ordinary great whites, put it that way. And I thought there was some gory deaths here. You know, I did like a lot of the death scenes in this movie, especially when it involves a lot of people. There's 2 scenes in this film where a lot of people are just taken out by sharks all over the place. I do think some of the CGI was rough. I mean, some of it was okay, but when there was lots of sharks on screen attacking people, it was kind of rough there. The characters were fine, but they're nothing special, nothing to latch onto too much. And there are some character decisions in this film that you're just like, why are you doing this? Really? Oh my God, they drive you insane. Especially one involving the mayor. I was just screaming at the TV going, what is wrong with you? But overall, it's a fun time. It takes a while to get going. It takes about 45 minutes for anything to happen. So you might have to be a little bit patient with it. But the second half of the movie I thought it was quite fun, actually, despite its problems. So that is Under Paris. Next up, we have Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Now, a lot of people hated the first movie from last year. I was one of them who got a little bit of a kick out of it, despite its many problems. However, this movie was a lot better. I enjoyed this a lot more than the first one. And this is basically, you can see the production value in this film. You know, it's stepped up the notch because the first one I think it made like 10 times its budget. So they've put all the money into this one, and there's a bigger budget here. And you can definitely tell I liked what they did a little bit with making this a sort of a remake, and it is explained in the movie why. I don't like the explanation why, but I liked that they sort of discarded that movie and started again because they have a better budget. It worked because the mask design and stuff was better. It has new characters in this film. I've got to say, Owl, who was the new introduction to this movie, was such a vicious villain. You know, he was the best thing about this entire film for me. Some of the death scenes involving Kim were just playing up mean, and this is a very evil-spirited film. If you like them grindhousey, trashy, you know, really hardcore, violent horror movies, you're definitely going to get something here, because some of the death scenes in this film were so creative, especially one in the opening scene. But every time that owl is involved, I mean, he's just ripping people to shreds, basically. The body count is off the scale, and that was a good thing, but also a bad thing for me, because as the movie went on, it's kind of just going for as many kills as it can, and the novelty kind of wears off. I kind of wish it would have kept to the creative side of things like it did in the first half of the film, but it just felt like it was going for the biggest body count it could. I definitely thought the guy who played Christopher Robin was such an upgrade in this movie. The acting was a whole lot better in this film as well, and there's a bit more story involved here, and I was kind of surprised how much story was actually in there. So it does attempt to sort of right the wrongs of the first film instead of just being this slasher for money-making sake, and it does actually try to have a story here. And I appreciated it for that. I wouldn't say it was fully executed well, especially the big exposition dump we get in the middle of the film. But overall, I had a good time with this movie. I definitely think it's worth a watch if you're into your slashers. Even if you don't like the first film, there might be something here for you. So that up next was Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. A bit of a surprise. Next up, we have The Strangers Chapter 1. Now, I know a lot of people hate this movie as well. Is this a controversial list? I'm sorry if it is and you think I'm just trying to be controversial, but this is my honest thoughts. It's just the way I see things. Now, a big problem for me with the first original Strangers movie is that I hate that movie, okay? And this one being a remake was very strange. It tries to do a lot of the same things that the original Strangers from 2008 did, and that was a very, very weird approach. However, after watching the original Strangers a week before this, I would go to this one every single time, and that is mainly because the two characters in this film are still a lot more likable than Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman in that original movie. Now, they do make a few stupid mistakes in this film, a few bad decisions, I will admit that, but I just like this couple more. In that original 2008 film, they're just arguing all the way through it, you know, you just don't like them. I don't like Liv Tyler as an actress, I've got to be honest, but in this film, they seem like a much more joyful couple. You can get behind them, you want them to survive, they've got plans for the future, you know, they're really excited about what's to come, and it makes you want them to get out of the situation. I actually thought The Strangers kind of cool in this movie as well. In the first film, they're kind of just lurking through the shadows and stuff, but here they seem a little bit more brutal, I thought, and it just was paced better. I mean, I know I'm comparing them a lot, but they basically are the same film. I just preferred this version a hell of a lot more over that original, and this one just flowed for me a lot better. One thing I will say is there's a lot more exterior shots in this movie where we're in the town and stuff a little bit more. We're not just based in the house for the whole film, although 75% of it is, but that sort of broke it up a little bit and kind of worked for me as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm one of them few people who just prefer this one, and I'm excited for Chapter 2. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do next, because we're another 2 of these movies to come, so we'll see. But yeah, up next is The Strangers Chapter 1. Next up, we have Immaculate. Now, this is a very similar movie to the first Omen, but I just enjoyed this one a hell of a lot more than that film, mainly because the third act is just insane, and Sydney Sweeney is a great character in this film, someone you can really get behind. It's the same sort of premise. A nun goes to this convent to give her life to God and become a full-on nun, and she's just going to stay there forever, basically. But some weird things are going on in this convent, and it is all fully explained in the third act, and I thought it was a really surprising way to go. It really worked for me. There is some brutal ass stuff happening in that third act, and it was just a really fun time. And Sydney Sweeney sort of answered their critics here who say she can't act, because there's some great moments here, especially the final scene of the film. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the image where she's kind of just screaming with the blood on her face. You know, that was awesome. One of my favorite horror movie moments of the year. The first 30 to 45 minutes. There's a few generic jump scares. There's a little bit of that darkness I was talking about, like the first Omen had, where all these movies are very dark now. And religious horror isn't really my sort of thing, but this one worked for me. It did. And if I'm going to watch this or the first Omen, it's definitely going to be this one every single time. It's weird how similar these two films are, but this one was just a step above, I thought. And it's shorter as well. I mean, I'm not saying all movies have to be shorter, but it's just paced a lot nicer, I think, as well. You just feel like you've been in a better story than the absolute slog that the first Omen was. So that is immaculate. Okay guys, 5 more movies to talk about here, and up next we have a horror comedy from Zelda Williams, the daughter of Robin Williams, and that is Lisa Frankenstein. I was really looking forward to this one. I was excited to see what Zelda Williams could do on her directional debut, and it is a very, very colourful movie. It feels like it's plucked straight from the 80s. I think it takes place in 1989 in this film, but she set that time period down to a T. But she knows when to tone it down for the darker scenes when we go to the horror side of things. This basically follows Kathryn Newton, who is this weird girl at school. You know, she's not like the rest of the other girls, but that's kind of why I like her character. And she is obsessed with this corpse at the cemetery. Unbeknownst to her, she just knows that she's a weirdo. And this corpse ends up coming to life and sort of going along on a little dark journey with her, and some really nasty stuff starts to ensue, and you kind of takes you aback a little bit because you're kind of like getting into these characters and stuff, and next minute all crazy shit is happening. And I think the gore and stuff was fun. You know, I think it nailed a really good balance between the comedy and the horror. Really, it knows when it's a comedy and it knows when it's a horror. I really liked the characters in this. You know, I thought Kathryn Newton is such a good actress. You know, I always like her personality. The stepmom was a real bitch in this film, but she's so fun to be around as well. You know, Kathryn Newton's stepsister actually thinks Kathryn Newton's like Lisa, the name is obviously in the movie, is like this great person. And I like the way they switch that around because the step siblings never usually get on in these movies, but they switch that around a little bit. And also Cole Sprouse, who plays this dead body, was great, I thought. I know we've done 3 months of like acting with this body sort of coach to make him feel like a zombie, and he really felt like Billy from Hocus Pocus. I don't know if you remember that character, but I thought he'd done great in this. I can't believe that's the kid from Big Daddy and Ross's son from Friends, Ben. But yeah, he done a great job here. It's just a fun film that sort of has this quirky dark side to it. A lot of people are saying this is going to be a cult favorite in a few years, and maybe that will be so. We'll see, but I really enjoyed it. It's a shame it didn't do too well at the box office. So that is Lisa Frankenstein. Next up, we have another spider infestation movie that takes place in an apartment block, and that is Sting. I say spider infestation, but there's only one spider in this movie. And this is about this young girl who finds this spider and she keeps it as a pet, but unbeknownst to her, it is actually an alien spider that is growing in size and is out to kill everyone in this apartment. This movie really reminded me of the film Critters, but with a spider, probably because they're from space, like the spider and stuff. But it just reminded me of that, where there's things going around the vents and stuff and killing people off one by one. But Sting feels like a very, very dangerous villain in this movie. You know, there's a scene where this parrot is looking at the vent through a cage, and the vent doors come off and these big spider legs come out and the parrot's sort of shaking. And next minute you just see the aftermath of this parrot that's been ripped apart and stuff like that. You know, you just feel like this Sting is a little bastard, basically. And it starts with the animals and then starts taking humans out and stuff. I don't think my arachnophobia really worked in this one. I mean, it definitely did with Infested, but here, even if you're scared of spiders, I don't think there's much to be worried about here, because sometimes Sting does look a bit CGI-ish. But I still had a lot of fun with this one. You know, I just like the whole 80s throwback vibe to it that it had going on. I'm a fan of all those 80s little monster movies and stuff. And this one felt like it had been plucked straight from there. I thought the young actress done a great job, who plays Furiosa in the latest Mad Max film. And there's a bit of family dynamic going on there, where you know, she's trying to connect with her stepfather and stuff. I know that's a bit of a horror trait, but I'm just glad they threw a bit of story in there to get behind these characters, because you do get behind them. They're a lot more likable characters than the movie Infested, put it that way. Yeah, but I had a fun time with this. I thought Sting was an awesome villain, and I would definitely watch this again. It was just a cool little spider movie, and I need more spider horror movies in my life. I haven't seen too many, and it's weird that I've seen 2 this year already. But that is Sting. Next up, we have Abigail. This is a new vampire flick that sees this young girl basically taking out human characters, adult characters, should I say, left, right, and centre. So these petty criminals, basically, Melissa Barrera and Dan Stevens and stuff, kidnap this girl, and they're going to hold her for ransom for $50 million because her father is like this rich bastard, and he's going to pay to get her back. But unbeknownst to them, she is actually a vampire who does a lot of ballerina while she's killing them all off one by one. And it just basically sees this Abigail character taking all these characters out. And I thought it was a fun enough film. I think this was definitely built up way too much for me over on Twitter, but it was definitely still a film I enjoyed. I liked a lot of the characters in this movie. Melissa Barrera showing that she can actually be a main protagonist here once again. You got Giancarlo Esposito in there. Dan Stevens is awesome in this movie. I mean, it might be, from the very few films I've seen him in, my favourite performance from him. He's just like this real hard-ass boy, comes out with dark humour and one-liners and stuff, and his character really worked for me. And each one of these characters has definitely got something different about them. You kind of do latch on to a few of them. You got Catherine Newton in there as well, who I thought she was awesome in this once again. There was a few fun kills in there, you know, nice gore, you know, if you're a horror hound, there's going to be stuff for you here, a bloodhound, should I say. But I do think the movie tries to do too much towards the end. It definitely twists and turns in one too many directions, and it just doesn't know when to let up. And I was thinking, okay, you are just dragging this out now. And that was my main problem with it. Also, there's way too much exposition on each of these characters. Like, we have this big exposition dump, and then they do it again about 30 minutes later. I'm like, haven't we just done this? But overall, it's a fun vampire flick with, basically, you get what it says on the tin. Lots of bloodshed. So that is Abigail. Next up, we have Arcadian. This was a real surprise hit for me. This stars Nicolas Cage and Jaden Martell. And we also have this other kid in it who's Jaden Martell's brother, and Nicolas Cage is the father. I forgot his name, I'm really sorry, but he was another great actor in this film. And this basically takes a lot of inspiration from A Quiet Place. So basically, these characters have all day to go out and get what they need. They need food, they need supplies and stuff. But at night, these monsters are going to come and try and kill them. And basically, they have to maintain their safe house, basically, where they live, so these monsters can't get in. You can see why these characters are hiding at night, because these monsters are terrifying in this movie. They are so creepy. I love the design of them. They were really interesting. There is a moment where one of them is trying to reach a character through a letterbox or a window, and it's just like, holy shit, this is so weird. I love the design of them, though. There's also a lot of character development in this movie. Like, the whole world is lost hope, basically. It kind of feels like The Last of Us mixed with A Quiet Place. But a lot of characters have just lost hope. And there's a bit of a romance involving the other brother, Jaden Martell's brother, and this other girl who lives a little bit across the next village. And that gives you hope for the characters. You do feel like there's a bit of hope in a world that has lost all hope. So I like the way they did that. You know, it felt like there was something to fight for, something to strive for. And when these characters decide to fight back, it just makes for an absolutely brilliantly explosive third act. I love the third act of this movie. It was so fun. Nicolas Cage, if you come in here to see him, he does take a little bit of a backseat in this film. Don't expect a full Nicolas Cage fest. But overall, this was a really, really fun post-apocalyptic horror movie. And I definitely recommend it if you like films like A Quiet Place and stuff. Yeah, I love the creature design in this. So that is Arcadian. In first place, though, we do have Late Night with the Devil. Now, this follows David Dastmalchian as this TV host called Jack Delroy, whose ratings are dwindling a little bit, and he decides to make a big comeback on Halloween night in 1977. And I gotta say, The set design here was absolutely unbelievable. It actually felt like you were watching a 1970s TV show. It's almost done in a found footage sort of way, but not. You know, it's like a twist on found footage, if you like, because you are meant to be watching the TV show from that night. And David Dastmalchian was absolutely brilliant in the role here as this TV presenter. He talked to me like he'd been talking to me for years. It felt like I'd been watching his show, Night Owls, for years. So he really spoke to you as a TV presenter. Good to see him in the main role, not just the side roles like he's usually in. I thought he'd done an excellent job, and this is surely going to open more stuff to him in future. But I really liked the whole design, the set design. It really did feel like a 1970s TV talk show. And all the people in the crowd are dressed up in Halloween costumes and stuff. It's a great one to watch in October, and I'll probably revisit in October because my wife has not seen this movie yet. I think this will be a good one to watch around October time with her. But he gets these guests on the show, and he talks to them one by one, and they're like, you know, people who are can read your mind and stuff, and there's people who are basically demonic researchers and stuff, and there's like this woman who comes on with this young girl who claims to be possessed by something, and that all comes through to fruition a bit later on in the film and gives us one of the best moments of 2024 in the horror genre, in my opinion. But that third act is all awesome, man. And it really is a great build-up leading up to what actually happens there. But I think this movie is full of great characters. Like all the guests you get on, they're all different. They've all got their own personalities. He's got this sideshow presenter called Gus, who's just a really fun character to be around. My biggest problem with the movie was the final 10 minutes. I don't think this ended very well, and I just wish this would have ended on a much more brighter note. Not even a brighter note, just a better note. And I would have walked away thinking that was absolutely brilliant. But it's still a very, very good film. I really did enjoy it. It's in my top 5 or 6 of the year overall in movies. And I imagine it'll be in my top 10 horror movies come the end of the year, put it that way. I really did enjoy it. It was something original, something unique, and something I've basically never seen before. I know that means all them words, but, you know, it was just nice to have something fresh brought to the table, and I'm really looking forward to revisiting this one again. So that is, in first place, Late Night with the Devil. Okay guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I know a lot of you will not agree with my list, and nor should you. Everyone is different. What did you think of this ranking? And also, is there any horror movies I've missed that I need to watch? Also, leave your rankings down below, or your top 5, your top 10, whatever you want, and I'll get back to you all, I promise. Thanks so much guys. You take care, and I'll see you on the next video.